Hi, welcome to Talking Tech Journeys, Season 1. I'm Ben Whiteley of BPM Tech, and I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Clayton, Project Program Management Consultant.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, good. Yeah, really looking forward to this. Thanks for joining. I know you might have a familiar face, Andy. Some of the viewers might remember when you went viral over Christmas.
Ho, 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 ho! Merry Christmas! Yeah, thank you for that, Ben. Ho, ho, ho. I've still got the beard. I can still get the job. I'm looking to see what I can do to take the Easter Bunny's job next.
Well, yeah, I'm sure we'll look forward to that one. But again, many thanks for your time, Andy, and it'd be
No,
great
not at all.
to discuss and elaborate further on talking tech journeys. So straight into it, really. It'd be great for a brief introduction, background, summary of your tech journey, please, Andy.
Yeah, so looking back, and when you asked me to do this and thinking back on it and the tech journey and where it's come, so my technical background started when I joined the army, the Royal Signals, and I did an apprenticeship in telecoms. But before that, there was always an interest. Back in 79, 80, when the little personal computer boom started, and I had my dad had, I was still a kid, ZX81 with, a whole 1K of RAM, and
Lovely.
basic. Yeah. And I remember the excitement when we expanded it to 16K of RAM, which was unbelievable. But yeah, I'd always had an interest, really, kind of, avionics. I wanted to do avionics. Ended up in telecoms. The army, we talked about when I left the army. I joined AT&T as an installation engineer. Left them 25 years later as a program director. I'd become an accidental project manager in the middle of all of that. Had my own training and consultancy business for a while, and then a couple of roles back in program and project management out of telecoms recently.
Well, yeah, so some journey then, and yeah, look forward to exploring further. So let's take it back, Andy, to when it all started. Obviously, it'd be good to go into a bit more detail as to your journey. So your first job then, how did this shape you and set you on your path and journey that you're on today?
So yeah, like I mentioned, I joined the army. I joined the army straight from school as what they called an apprentice. So I was literally 16. Did an apprenticeship for a couple of years up at Harrogate, which is now the junior foundation college. In fact, I think they knocked the buildings down that we had and built those. But yeah, I had an interest in avionics. My dad was in the army as well, and my uncle Tony, who wasn't obviously my real uncle, but a friend who my dad worked with,
Yeah, sure.
was an avionics technician, and I was just fascinated by it. And he was an extremely clever bloke, and knew an awful lot and very interesting to me. So he kind of got me interested in that. Then when I applied for the army, I wanted to be an avionics technician. Long story short, big waiting list for that, and then the recruiter kind of threw at me and said, "We've got this new job opened up called telecoms mechanic in the signals." And I said, "Yeah, okay, that sounds good." And literally that was it, almost kind of accidental. It's never the things you plan, is it? It's life
Absolutely, no, 100%.
Yeah, an interesting way in taking you. So that shaped me in two ways, really, from the army and the discipline perspective, but I've been kind of living in that environment anyway, and also from a technology perspective. We had the state of the art for those days, but it wasn't very arty, should I say, back in those days. I mean, we actually worked on lead cables and things like that. Fiber was but a distant dream.
Can imagine, yeah.
In somebody's mind. So so that really set me up. And I remember when I had my first interview outside of the army for a job as a contractor with AT&T and Philips, as it was at the time. I'd gone down to Malmesbury in Wiltshire for the interview from Doncaster, and by the time I'd got home, they'd phoned the agency, and the agency had phoned my wife, and you know, I'd got the job. So you know, I think my army training, you know, set me up for that. I think I knew more about the subject I was being asked than the people who were asking the questions. So I've always tried to be in that position.
I mean, I suppose, like you said, it's the first job and great introduction to where you ended up. I mean, no doubt there was mentors, bumps in the road, doubts, challenges. You know, anything that specifically sticks in your mind back then.
There's yeah, it's learning the things that you can influence and the things that you can't. You know, there's a saying, isn't there? But I can't remember at the moment. But you know, learn to recognise what you can influence and accept what you can't.
Yeah.
And that's always been something that I've, you know, never got hung up on. Going into my first job with AT&T and doing some kind of civilian approach to things. You know, in the army, you did it and you got on with it, and doing things like presentation skills courses. There's a lady who was instrumental in opening up my mind to a lot of things, called Nicola Wise, who still runs a training to this day.
Brilliant. Good.
Nicola, a nice plug for you there. But you know, that really kind of set me up on my way to thinking. Not only was it first class training, but it kind of opened my mind up to what I could do and what I was capable of.
Real. So yeah, no doubt set the foundation, and obviously, just in terms of, you know, your career sort of spanning the globe. Obviously, you've touched on your time in the army, but you know, crossing America, Iraq, you know, lots of interesting places and some journey really, Andy. So yeah, it'd be great to understand the journey a little further.
Sure. So yeah. Finished my apprenticeship, went to do my driver training. I'd been posted to a place in Blandford, 30 Signal Regiment, who were globetrotters, and you kind of went anywhere at last minute notice. My posting actually got changed while I was there, and I had to seek out a corporal, somebody who'd been in the army a lot longer than me, who was in the Royal Signals in my corps, who I could ask. I said, you know, where is 259 Signal Squadron? And they got very upset with me. That's when I found out that it was in Cyprus.
Right.
So my first posting was 3.5 years in Cyprus. Like I say, I after leaving the army, I got to work for AT&T, and that was working all over the UK, installing and commissioning 565 megabit line systems, 140 megabit line systems, and 565 line systems, coax, and then fiber line systems. So doing that all over the UK, and I got to see, because Dad was in the army, and I'd never really lived in the UK. I got to see what a beautiful country the UK was. Spent a lot of time up in Scotland, which was fantastic.
So I mean, just in terms of, obviously, you know, Iraq, obviously, you know, management of risk, different culture, no doubt high pressure situations, maybe time critical. I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting just to get a bit more of an insight into that journey, Andy.
Yeah. So the Iraq project was interesting. You can use the word interesting if you did define it. You talk about the management of risk. You know, the first risk you're looking at there is your own people and risk of life. So we did a lot of things there around making sure our people were looked after, because we worked for an American company. The company wanted us to drive around in these big GMC vehicles with machine guns poking out of every corner. The boss of the project was another Brit, and we kind of said, yeah, we don't really want to do that. And we got hold of some close quarter protection folks from the UK. We set up a deal with a taxi company, and a local taxi company. We went round in local taxis with the close quarter protection people with us. So we blended in rather than stood out, which was a big thing for personal safety. So yeah, to coin a phrase from the Falklands War, and a journalist, I counted them all out and I counted them all in again. So we did all right. But yeah, the fact that we had 250,000 or just shy of 250,000, 240,000 lines to install, and we had just over 3 months to do it in. Was really, you know, one of the most time pressured projects that I'd worked on. It was also good from the perspective that I had the absolute support of everybody within the company, including a bit of an embarrassing call with the CEO back in the days before video calls. I was sat in a conference room in Abu Dhabi with all the leadership from the region, and Pat, who was our CEO at the time, was telling them that whatever Andy wanted, Andy got.
Right.
Which included the look of daggers from them immediately. But so that was an interesting dynamic that I had to work through from a stakeholder management perspective, which I did, and become good friends with some people who are still friends to this day, 20 odd years later. So yeah, very, very interesting days.
Then, like I say, you know, there's probably a lot of challenges and risks that you did overcome, and probably shaped you for where you are today.
Yeah. So yeah, opening up from a challenges perspective, obviously getting hold of the material and things, and never saying no. Understanding what would drive people. I'd always known this, but this kind of drove it home for me from the perspective of people make projects. You know, we were in Jebel Ali, just outside Dubai, putting these switches and MDFs into containers before they were driven up into Iraq and then distributed to the sites. So I had a team of just over 100 people, I think, at that time.
Right.
A lot of them were installers. They were working shifts.
Yeah.
So we were working 24 hours
around the clock,
on
right,
building this stuff out, because we had no other choice. And you know, it was amazing, you know, what you would do if you turned up at 11 o'clock at night with a pizza, for example. And because I'd been a telecoms engineer, you know, and I'd got an apprenticeship and a City and Guilds for it and everything, I'd nudge one of the guys out of the way and do a bit of wire wrapping myself and things like that. And they would say, "Oh no, boss, it's okay. You don't know what," and I just showed them what I could do, and you know, that kind of set it off for them as well. But yeah, leading by example, communication, making sure people have what they need to be able to do the job that you want them to do.
Well, like you said, I think you touched on people quite a few times there, but sounds like a real team effort.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. Like I said, still talking to people now. There's one guy I was very close with says they still use that one until a couple of years ago. We're still using the kind of methodology that we set up in region now.
Right.
So that's nice to know. So yeah, a real team effort and very rewarding from that perspective.
Can imagine. Great stuff. Well, yeah, thanks for that, Andy. So just the further sort of progression into your career, you embarked on a training business for approximately 10 years. So how did this come about?
Yeah, so I left the States and was working for Lucent as the company had become still in the UK, and took an opportunity for redundancy. They were whittling the teams down so much, it was unbelievable. Then trying to get a job in the UK, I was finding it difficult to even get anybody to acknowledge me and call me back. And I asked a recruiter one day, and they said, "Well, you've not got Prince 2 on your
really."
On your
I'm just going to say why, yeah.
Yeah,
with all that experience, right?
Yes. So I wasn't getting through the ATS. You know, didn't have Prince 2.
Sure. Yeah.
Reject. So I looked into what this Prince 2 was, and put myself on a course. Long story
10
short,
years later, it's a career.
Yeah. Well, I did the course. The company I did it with, I happened to be with the lead instructor. He was impressed by my knowledge and my understanding. I passed the exam with quite a high mark, and they asked me if I'd ever thought about becoming a trainer. So I'd been a trainer back in the day on a wireless local loop project when I was an R&D project manager, we were looking for a trainer to deliver the product. Of course, it was brand new. Not too many people knew anything about it. Lots of very, very clever people who knew everything about little bits. It was put to me one day at a meeting that the only person knew a little bit about everything was me. So I ended up doing the training for 3 or 4 months until we could bring a proper trainer on board, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed imparting my knowledge. So I started doing the training, built that up into a bit of a consultancy where I'd go in to companies after delivering the training and help them implement Prince2 or a project management method into their organization. It's never one size fits all.
True. Yeah.
And whatever we needed to do. So yeah, I spent a good 10 years doing that until the market was kind of pulled away with people who were able to cut me out on price and things like that. So I was getting offers of contracts and running courses at the same time. I was employing people to run the courses for me, and I had to kind of make a decision which way to go. So I went back into the full-time employment, as it were.
What sort of principles, foundations, problems were you solving?
Lack of discipline, really.
Right.
Again, with most things, and what I've seen in the commercial world is that people want to do projects for usually because it will bring in revenue. Okay, so a lot of companies will focus on the revenue, and somebody somewhere will have promised a certain date. Sure. Whether that's realistic or unrealistic is, then down to whatever the planning brings. So I've always tried to bring the sales force and the project management team closer together. Did that in my last role where I put the project/delivery managers out with the regional sales account managers, just to make sure that we're not selling something that we can't deliver. And that was always the case of people wanted what they wanted when they wanted it without looking at reality. So always a bit of a reality check, always trying to bring the discipline and the governance back in, so people knew what they were doing and what they were going to get.
Like say validation of, is it actually going to be worthwhile, and setting the foundations, principles which some businesses will lack.
Yeah, the business benefits, really, just about the business benefits and understanding what this project is going to bring us, whether it's a case of we're doing it for revenue, or it's going to bring about change or transformation or
enablement.
Whatever that
Yeah, sure. So I suppose the most, bringing it back to the here and now, and most recent sort of 5-7 years, move back into program management, professional services, transformation, impact programs. How was it transitioning from, obviously, your life delivering training, getting back into managing, delivering that transformation and change?
It was interesting. It was like moving into a longer term consultancy, because I now had the opportunity to make a change. The first role that I had was in digital print. There were some project managers there who were not so experienced at project management, but really great at digital print, and then bringing them up to speed and on board and understanding the basic principles behind things, and then getting the rest of the company to talk about where we wanted to go. Getting the CEO's buy-in was always very interesting, especially under a PE-backed company where that would change quite often. But yeah, making sure that people were along for the journey. You could focus on it more. You knew it was going to be a longer journey, and you weren't just providing the 50,000 foot view. You were down there on the ground, sleeves rolled up, getting on with it, and impacting things on a daily basis. So yeah, I've loved it. I've loved walking away from the two companies recently where they didn't have governance, they didn't have discipline, to walking away where there is governance and there is discipline and there's properly run projects. To
making that difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
You touched on sea level. I mean, how important do you think that is in terms of, you know, the buy-in from, you know, sea level through to, you know, almost a top down in terms of that impact and buy-in?
It's absolutely critical,
Mm,
because the C-suite are setting the direction. So of the company, of the vision, of the mission, of the values. So you've got to work with them, understand where they want to go, and then help them understand how they can get there. And it might not necessarily be a direct journey; it might be a step
yeah, sure.
journey.
Yeah.
And then you've got to rely on them to light the fires for everybody else. The worst thing that you could do with change is try and implement that change, discover what that change should be. If you've got the top saying, well, we don't really need to change, that's what, change is inevitable,
Absolutely.
except from a vending machine, as Terry Wogan said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're bringing them on board and just understanding them from their position. And that I think is always the key from any stakeholder perspective,
Mm,
whether they're a C-level or whether they're an engineer who is, wire wrapping cables, is understand things from their point of view, look through their glasses, their eyes, as it
sure.
were, as to what they want out of things and how things that you do are going to impact them.
No, absolutely. You know, I think that makes a big difference with the definition of, a project being successful. I mean, obviously, you took time out in terms of, you know, the training consultancy. Do you think your style changed when you sort of dipped your toe back into the program professional services world?
I think I was more focused on the discipline and the governance side of
Mm,
things. I think I definitely was, which I think helped from the kind of transformation roles that I was doing to enable people
yeah.
to focus on that. Because you've got people who've got a very narrow focus on, recognizing that revenue,
Mm,
and making sure we've done the enabling project and moving on. Whereas in the background, I'm kind of asking the questions, well, hang on a minute, this may be an enabler, it may be getting some revenue in, but how much are we spending? I worked at one company where they never tracked costs.
right. Okay.
So on a project, and that to
Mm,
me is the basic time cost quality. Um,
absolutely.
so you have to ask the question, why are we doing what we're doing if we don't really
Mm,
understand it? So to first change things, we had to understand them. So putting in the rigor of a reporting cycle,
mm,
putting in the rigor of proper action item reviews, change reviews, a change review board, all that sort of thing. So that's where it helped. It kind of didn't stop the people who were doing the day to day, keeping
mm,
the wheels rolling, sort of thing. But it was definitely about a perspective of making sure that from the wheels rolling, they at least had a
yeah.
service station to pull into and have a quick reflection on what they were doing.
Well, I was just going to say reflection. Yeah. No, it's sort of quite prominent in sort of what you've discussed, and I suppose, you know, the benefits of a successful, you know, project and program, which sort of brings us on nicely really in terms of, obviously we've discussed, you know, your background in training, project program management. You know, I speak to a lot of people who have sort of differing views in terms of, you know, the keys to a successful project and program. But I suppose a key question for you, Andy, and keen to get your thoughts, is how do you measure a successful, you know, if a project is successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually, and depending on what the project would be, is people usually have a black and white view.
Mm,
But this is where it comes back to setting the scene and setting the requirements and setting up the discipline and the governance in the first
yeah.
place. Why are we doing this project?
Mm,
What are we looking to do? What are the benefits behind it? I've worked on a couple of projects that retrospectively we've looked at,
mm,
and we've spent nearly as much implementing and enabling something as the revenue coming in that we were going to get. And sometimes that's okay, because you might say, yeah, okay, well, we're putting this in. This might be a loss leader, but we want to go on and multiply our sales to this customer, which is absolutely fine. And that can be deemed as a success as you review the business benefits later on down the line. Um, you know, stopping projects. There was a lot of projects stopped in COVID because you were looking at where you were going, looking at your next stage and what you were doing, and suddenly it was, well, we can't do that. So, you know, some projects were stopped, some projects were put on hold. And you know, people say, well, the project's failed because it's stopped. I would disagree with that. That it's actually the project itself has been successful from the perspective of you've understood where you were going, and you've saved the company more money, effort, time, face with the customer as well, probably, by recognizing that it was going no further and bringing things to a halt, rather than moving on and not being able to deliver what was promised in the first place.
Yeah, I know you mentioned, you know, a lot of environmental and sort of, you know, bigger factors. You know, you touched on COVID. I mean, obviously in the world of recruitment and sourcing, it's, you know, it was something that did really change overnight, and people's perceptions of, you know, like I said, the basics, the foundation, the communication sort of turned on its head overnight. I mean, were there any lessons learned in terms of remote working and, I suppose, where we were a couple of years ago and where we are today?
So I think you touched on it earlier when you asked me about lessons that I'd learned from Iraq. So one of the things there was the ability to be able to react quickly to any particular situation, i.e. we can't go to that city because insurgents have just taken it over. Okay, well, let's you know, divert somewhere else. So from that perspective, it was easy enough because I'd kind of practiced at that already to be able to shift focus and bring people along with me. I was working from home in the late 90s. I was I was implementation director for Y2K. I had a global team. I was living and working in the States. I had people on the West Coast. I was on the East Coast. So from a timing perspective, it kind of made sense. So I could see the value of that already. I had some members of my team who were working from home already. So it's just about communication. You know, we had some people would walk through the office with the clipboard saying, why aren't your people here? And it's, well, because they're doing their job, you know. So it's really about my perspective, learning from that and being able to show others from the perspective that quite a few people stepped up and really showed what they were worth during that time, is that it's, you know, people make projects. You can have all the processes and all the tools that you want. If you haven't got people, you know, who have got great soft skills or who are adaptable or are resilient or whatever, then, you know, your project's going to fail no matter what. You know, no matter what the technology or whatever is placed behind it. So, yeah,
I know that's a big thing.
People.
Yeah, I know that's a big thing for you, isn't it? Sort of removing barriers and empowering people to ultimately get on and deliver.
That's almost like you're reading words from my CV there, Ben.
No comment. Here's one I learned earlier. But no, well, like I said, I think we could talk around this, but I think that's really given us a good insight into, you know, your sort of journey and, you know, sort of taking it back to the beginning and here you are now. I mean, obviously sitting here today, would there be any sort of piece of information or insight that has shaped you, or, you know, some of the listeners, you know, a couple of pieces where you think this is critical for, you know, success?
Yeah. There's lots of things, and I've enjoyed the chat, and we could probably talk for a lot longer. But you know, communication is key. Soft skills are key. Communication skills. There'll be one person in particular who'll laugh at that. I always tell my folks, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Do twice as much listening as you do talking, and understand, put yourself in other people's positions and get to understand your stakeholders and where they're coming from and what they want out of, whether it's the change or the project or whatever it is that you happen to be working on. So you know, it could be win-win with everybody. But you know, be yourself. Do all the relevant training that you need to do, but absolutely work on the soft skills.
Yeah, no, great. Well, yeah, we hear that loud and clear, and like I say, you know, we've touched on that throughout today. So, Yeah, it just sort of leads me to wrap things up, really, Andy. So yeah, many thanks for your time. Obviously, great talking today. I
Likewise,
think
I've enjoyed it.
brilliant, good. I think just lastly, it'd be good to hear any views from the listeners in terms of Andy's views as well in terms of his project management and art or science. Have you got any thoughts there, Andy? Really?
Wow, this is a good question, and I've had this discussion many times over the years, and yeah, I really would be interested to see what people's thoughts are in the comments on this one. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a both, but you know, where it falls down on the scales is dependent upon where you are in the project. It's definitely a science from the perspective of the tools and the processes and the delivery and the models that you put in place and the governance and all that sort of thing. So
Yeah,
definitely
sure.
a science from that perspective, especially working as I have done mostly in telecoms or technology. But it's definitely an art. It's definitely an art from the perspective of communication, from the perspective of negotiation. Whenever I've done a change project that's involved like a total operating model change and moving people away from what they do, I always seek out the biggest naysayer and bring them on board, listen to what they want and listen to them say, oh, it's never going to work. We've tried this 3 times already, and that's why isn't it going to work? What do you think we need to do? And how about if I showed you we could do that by doing this and this? And bringing those people on board kind of tends to drag others as well. So, and that's an art in doing that, how you work with people. So definitely a bit of both, probably more art than science.
And do you think, obviously from your, I know your training days, can you train that art?
Yes, to a certain extent, because I think going back to Nicola, Wise, back in my training kind of 20 or 30 years earlier, could it really be that long? 30 years, yeah, more. Then she was training the principles and things, but also opened up my eyes to things. So yeah, definitely, it definitely can be trained. There's got to be some semblance of it there.
Yeah, sure.
You've got to have the kind of personality whereby you can either act in a kind of an outgoing mode, or that you are naturally outgoing or gregarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can absolutely learn it. And I think every day's a school day for me. Every day's a school day.
Yeah.
And I've not stopped learning and will continue to do so, especially with the event of things like AI. AI is going to be great from a program management perspective, from being able to get all the mundane things out of the way, and that will allow project managers to focus more on the things that require their soft skills. So the question as to whether it's an art or a science in 10 years time might be a completely different answer.
Very good point. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see, like you say, how the world of technology, AI, but ultimately, like you say, people are people. They've got their personal DNA, so to speak. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's interesting that balance between the two. So, well, as I said, thanks for your time, Andy. And yeah, we'll no doubt speak soon. And yeah, thanks to the listeners, and it'd be great to hear your views in the chat. And yeah, many thanks.
Thank you, Ben.